Today, like I said, we'll be in Mark chapter 4, starting in verse 35. Mark chapter 4, starting in verse 35. As we get started, I have a question. Have any of you ever watched any of those survival TV shows where you've got like a guy that's trying to teach you how to survive in the wilderness or something like that? Yeah, a lot of us have seen those shows like Man vs. Wild or Survivor Man or something, where you have some individual, some expert that's out in the wilderness, and they're like, if you find yourself in this situation, you can do these things and you can survive. And if you're like me, a regular person, you look at that and you're like, yep, I'd be dead because I'm not doing that. Yeah. So we see people and they this is how you survive. There's another type of those survival shows that is also really interesting. It's not where you have some expert that could survive on the sun if you put them there. What you have is these shows where it's an individual that went through some crazy thing and they're giving you their experience. They're giving you kind of a testimony of, man, this is what I went through. And you'll have shows like I Survived or I should have died or something like that. You'll have these shows and they'll like dramatize it. They'll have like an actor acting it out while the person kind of tells you what they went through. And I think those are maybe even more engaging because that's a normal person. That's a person that got off the couch and they found themselves in a crazy situation. So one of those cases that I saw maybe a year or so ago that I thought was really interesting, there was this guy, he and his friends were going skydiving, which right there you put yourself in a dangerous situation. They were going skydiving, and all of a sudden the plane starts having mechanical issues. And the plane starts like spinning out of control and going down. And one of the guys, he is barely able to, but he manages to get out of the plane. He's got his parachute on. Everybody else dies. Like one other person fell out, but this guy's the only person that survived that gets out of the plane. And you think, I'm safe. He parachutes down into the ocean. He lands in the ocean, miles upon miles away from land, can't see anything. He's got no raft, no nothing, no provisions. He's just in the ocean, floating. And at this point, the question you ask is, I hope you worked on your backstroke and you're swimming, right? So he's floating, he's out there, and he floats, and then it starts to get dark. And then he's like, oh my goodness, I'm not going to make it. And it gets dark, and while it's dark, he's starting to get really weak because he's been backpedaling. He's starting to get weak, and when he's thinking, I'm about to die, I can't physically anymore, he starts to feel something. And he thinks it's a shark. He starts to feel something getting closer. He thinks it's a shark, and then it bumps against him, and it's a log. A big log that's just floating in the middle of the ocean, big enough for him to pull himself up on it like a raft. And then he's able to just float in this log. And there's all kinds of crazy other things that happen. Like he floats through a swarm of jellyfish, and they sting him all over his body, and it's this crazy story. He spends 24 hours just floating in the ocean, no provision, no nothing, to the point where he's getting delirious from the salt water and the sun, and then finally he gets rescued. And what's interesting about that story is that as they got to stretch it out over the course of a whole hour-long episode. What's funny about that story is every time he gets to a point where a major obstacle comes, like I'm too tired, I'm about to drown, all these jellyfish. Oh, I'm getting delirious from the exposure in the salt water. Oh, is that a shark? What is going on? Every time he hits one of those obstacles, he'll say, and I thought right then that I was going to die. And then I thought right then that I was going to die. He faced all of these cases, and every time I thought I was going to die. I thought this was it, and then something happened. I thought this was it, and then something happened. And the reason I tell that story is because that very much is an accurate picture of the kind of things that the apostles go through in our passage today in Mark chapter 4. They're in a situation which, honestly, if everything goes the way you would expect it to go, they should have died. Just like a guy floating in the ocean would never expect to have, out of all of the ocean, to have a log bump into him. I mean, it seems like it's all over. It's all lost. And that's the situation that the apostles found themselves in here. So let's start out by reading in chapter 4, starting in verse 35. It says, "And on that day, when evening had come, he, Jesus, told them, the apostles, 'Let's cross over to the other side of the sea.' So they left the crowd and took him along, since he was in the boat, and the other boats were with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking over the boat, so that the boat was already being swamped. And he was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion." We'll stop there for now. So look at the situation that they're in. Get a picture of this. They're out. They're teaching with Jesus. Everything's great. He's doing miracles, working everything. And then Jesus says, "Okay, guys, we're going to get in the boat and we're going to go to the other side of the Sea of Galilee." Think of something like Lake Pontchartrain or something like that. Let's get on the boat, go on the other side of the Sea of Galilee, and we're going to go out. And as they go out, these are fishermen. So understand this. Most of these people, not all of his disciples, not all of his apostles, but at least some of his apostles are fishermen. So this is what they do. So they understand boats, they understand ships, they understand this particular sea, the Sea of Galilee. And they know that on the Sea of Galilee, it's actually very common for you to have storms that kind of come out of nowhere. Sea of Galilee, kind of down a little bit, there's kind of mountains over it. So these storms, these weather fronts will get in there and kind of get trapped over the Sea of Galilee because of the mountains. And they'll get trapped and it gets really bad. Like being in a bowl and everything is just all over the place. And that's what happened. Here they are. One of these storms come up. A lot of these guys are fishermen who have fished on this sea for most of their life. And they're in the middle of the sea, and this storm comes. And the boat starts filling. It starts filling up to the point where they're like trying to paddle water out of the boat. And it's filling, and it's filling, and it's filling. And they're paddling, and they know what the score is. They know what's going to happen. Because they've probably seen it happen to people they know. The water fills up. All hope is lost. I think what's interesting here is in that moment, they were there because they were following what Jesus told them to do. That's something that we can skip over. Look at it. It says, "And Jesus said to them, 'Let us go over to the other side of the sea.'" And that's when they get on the boat. Jesus is the one that, and it says he was already in the boat. They took him along with them. Jesus told them to go. They were in God's will. And they find themselves in a situation where they thought, this is it. I'm gone. And this is important for us because I find that in our lives as believers, maybe not in a literal storm like this, but we go through figurative storms. Well, we live in hurricane territory, so a lot of us have gone through literal storms as well. But we deal with these things in life where we prayed about something, we said, "God, what do you want me to do?" And this big financial decision, "God, what do you want me to do?" God, in this relationship decision, "God, what do you want me to do?" God, in this church decision or job decision or family decision or some other kind of decision, God, what do you want me to do? And as you prayed about it and you sought counsel from other people, you really felt like God was saying, go in this direction. And then you find yourself out in the middle of a storm. You find yourself in a situation where you're like, whoa. God, I prayed about this. God, this isn't something I've got myself into because of bad decisions or because of sin. God, I prayed about this. God, I was trying to do what you wanted me to do. And here I am. I am in the midst of a storm. My life is filling up. And I feel like I'm a goner. It's the kind of situation that they're in. And we have all been there. And if you haven't, you will be. I know a while back, I found myself in a situation, I'm not going to give too many details, where I prayed and I said, God, do you want me to go and do this thing? And then I was clear, I prayed a long time and I really felt like he was saying, go in this direction. And when I was doing this, I found myself in a situation where there were people who were saying lies about me. There were people who were talking behind my back. People who were attacking me. And I remember feeling so alone, and I would spend hours in prayer saying, God, I thought you told me to do this. And what happens in these situations, when we find ourselves in these situations, we thought we were going in the right direction. We thought we were doing the right thing. And here we are, surrounded by storms, surrounded by what seems like it's going to destroy us. It leads us to doubt. And we see that happen in this passage. We look at it starting in verse 38, and it says, and Jesus himself was in the stern, asleep on a cushion. And they woke him up and they said, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? Get this. So there's this storm, everything's happening. Jesus is in the stern of the boat and he's just napping. Storms, maybe thunder, lightning, big waves, everything's going. Jesus, how heavy of a sleeper are you? Right? He's not doing what they expect. Do something. And we find ourselves in that situation, right? God, my life is falling apart right now. And that will lead us to doubt God's ability. Are you able to do anything? In this case especially, it will lead you to doubt if God cares. And that's what happens here. What do they say to Jesus? They say, don't you even care that we're perishing? Don't you even care that we're dying? That always struck me. The person that chose them, that they have walked with, that they've done all this stuff with, and the first thing that they doubt, they don't say, Jesus, are you okay? Why are you sleeping like this? No, what do they say? What do they doubt? Do you even care? Do you care about us, Jesus? Do you care that we're about to die? Don't you care? You see, when we go through these hard times and we don't see God working on our timing, we don't see God working the way we want Him to work or the way we expect Him to work, what we start to do is we start to doubt. And we start to say, God, we one of two things. We say, God, are you just not able to do anything? But more often than not, we don't doubt God's ability. We say, God, do you not care? Don't you even care that my life's falling apart? Don't you even care that I'm perishing? Don't you even care? And what we see in this case is that doubt will eventually, as we're going through this difficult situation, the hardship, and going through the doubt of that, and eventually it's going to lead to a reality of who God actually is. Let's see. It says in verse 39, it says, and he, Jesus, got up and he rebuked the wind and he said to the sea, hush, be still. And the wind died down and it became perfectly calm. And he said to them, why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith? And they became very afraid and said to one another, who is this that even the wind and the sea obey him? Jesus wakes up and he asks a question that, let's be honest, it's a weird question, right? He asks, why are you afraid? Why are you afraid? To which we would say, did you look around you? What do you mean, why am I afraid? Why am I afraid? Look at the storm that was here before you hushed it up. But look at this storm. Look at all of this. How? Whoa. How can I not be afraid is what we would say. But understand Jesus' question. We look at this and it seems like a silly question. But actually, this question makes a lot of sense when you apply a dose of reality to this situation. They had seen Jesus cast out demons. They had seen Jesus heal the sick. They had seen Jesus multiply the loaves and fishes. They've seen Jesus do so many things. And they've seen that he cares about them and their well-being. This question is not why are you afraid? Guys, come on. Psh, of course, it's not a big deal. No, this is based on what you know about me and how much I care for you, based on what you know about God and how much he cares for you. Why are you scared? If you've ever been in a situation, so put yourself in this situation. Say you're on a tightrope, or you're having to climb a wall or something, and you're having to do a tightrope, and you're climbing a wall, and you're like dangling, and there's all this ground underneath you, and you're like, oh my goodness, if I fall, I'm going to die, right? That's perfectly legitimate for you to be afraid, right? Yeah. Now, let's say we put a harness on you, and we put a net underneath you. At that point, your fear, you've got two different safety things. And then you've seen on 50 other occasions where that harness and that net came through and protected other people. Is your fear as justified now? No. Now we still feel it. But all of a sudden, it's like, why are you afraid? Like you got your safety net, you got your harness, you've seen over and over again that they have protected you and other people. Why are you afraid? That's the kind of question Jesus is asking. He's not saying, oh, yeah, why are you afraid? It's not that big of a deal. No, he's saying, yes, it is a big deal. But based on what you know about the power of God, and based on what you know about his care for you, why are you afraid? You see, we can face impossible situations. But when you have a God who loves you and cares about you, the dynamic of that situation changes. If I tell you, having children really kind of helps to think about these things. You know, I think about my daughter. The vacuum cleaner terrified her. She's starting to get over it a little bit, but the vacuum cleaner, for some reason, terrified my daughter. We'd start cutting on that vacuum cleaner, and it would terrify her. But then all of a sudden, the first thing she would do, she would, and then she'd run, and then she jumps in my arms. And all of a sudden, You can vacuum all you want because she's in Daddy's arms. You see that difference is, I know in that 15-month-old or 12, in that little kid's arm, she knows, you know what, that vacuum is going to hurt me, but Daddy can protect me. That's the kind of question that Jesus is asking. He's saying, oh, ye of little faith. Essentially, he actually says, why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith? It says, do you still have no faith? After you've seen how much I can do, after you've seen how much I care, do you still not believe? It's this, don't you know? Yeah, this was bad. But don't you know who's got you? That's the thing here. But here's the struggle we run into. Let's just be honest. It's one, we kind of have we almost have spiritual amnesia, where we forget what God's done in our lives. Actually, it's a problem in the Old Testament. You see it all the time in the Old Testament. They'll put up memorials to remind them about what God has done because they keep forgetting. But we see that in our lives. We have this spiritual amnesia where we forget what God's done. We forget how much He cares. And it's like we constantly have to be reminded. I care about you. I care about you. I've got you. I care about you. I've got you taken care of. It's like we need that because we forget. I know somebody a friend who's been hurt a lot of times in their life. And they've had a very difficult life, and they've been hurt and let down by people. And this has become a major difficulty for them because there are several people in their life that do really care about them, would never let them down. But because this person has been so burned and they've been so hurt and they've been so programmed to not trust other people, what they say to everybody who loves them and cares about them, they keep saying, do you love me? Do you care about me? Do you? And they're always needing them all the time to tell them, I love you. I care about you. I'm going to come through for you. I'm here. To the point where the people that do genuinely love them, it hurts the relationship. Because they're saying, I have shown you this time, and this time, and this time, and this time, that I love you and that I'll come through for you. Why do you doubt me? Why do you keep doubting me? I've shown you 1,000 times that I care. I've shown you 1,000 times that if I say I'll come through for you, I'll come through for you. Why do you doubt me? That's the kind of question that Jesus is asking. He's saying, do you not have faith? How broken is your trust? Look, I brought you out. I told you. Why don't you trust by now? But again, because of our flesh, because of who we are, we're so broken. We're twisted. And by the grace of God and through the power of the Holy Spirit, He's making us into something new. But there's still that part of us that struggles to trust God. And that's the issue here. And even after everything, they finish it out and they say, and they became afraid. Now they're afraid for a different reason. For they said, who then is this that even the wind and the seas or the waves obey? They come face to face with the power of God. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Have you ever been in that situation before? I know I have, where you were panicking. You were in out and out panic. You were struggling so much. There was this hardship you were going through, and you kept praying, God, what are you going to do? What are you going to do, God? And then God comes through, and then you feel like an idiot. Anyone ever been that way? God comes through in some way that you never expected Him to come through, and He does something, and it wasn't even, you didn't have the kind of imagination that could make you think of this way that He was going to come through, and He comes through, and then you're like, God, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I can't even believe that you did that. Because I tell you, I doubt, based on what this says, that the apostles, when they woke Him up and said, do you even care? that they thought that he was going to hush the wind and the waves with a word. They probably were waking him up saying, don't you even care? Grab a paddle. Like, help get some water out. God can respond to our issues and to our problems in ways that we cannot imagine. Because he has power and he has a way of looking at things different than we can imagine. But also, God has plans that we can't understand. So sometimes that puts us in situations where we have to, where we're like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. And God's saying, God, don't you trust me by now? We've been doing this a long time together. Don't you trust me? Just trust me. So that leaves us with kind of a conclusion here. What are our takeaways? I want to kind of summarize the things that we can take away and we can learn from this story. The first thing that we learn from this is that being in God's will does not mean that we're free from pain and struggle. Just because you're in God's will, just because you're doing what He's called you to do, doesn't mean that you won't go through hardship and you won't go through struggle and you won't go through pain. Jesus was perfectly in the Father's will. He never deviated from the Father's will. He went through a pain that is unimaginable by any of us. Pain, injustice, struggle. And when we become Christians, we're saying, I'm following Him. I'm taking up my cross and I'm following Him. Being in God's will never gave us a guarantee that we would not go through suffering. We're following a person who followed the Father's will all the way to the cross. Following God will sometimes mean that we go through struggle and we go through trials, but ultimately we know that He will work all things together for the good of those who love Him and are called according to His purposes. Just like Jesus went to the cross and went through that shame, but ultimately not only was He victorious, but we were all victorious in Him who have put our faith in Him. The next thing, and this is kind of three things in one, that we really get from this. And when we go through these struggles, when we go through these difficulties, I want you to remind yourself of this over and over and over again. And that is that no matter what you're going through, God knows, God is able, and God cares. God knows, God is able, and God cares. Because again, we have spiritual amnesia, right? We forget these things. You look at this kind of scripture and like, well, obviously. But you see right in the middle of it, they doubt it. They say, don't you even care? And then at the end, their fear of the situation, they're like, oh my goodness, like even the wind and the waves, He obeyed. Like, he's able. And Jesus sent him out there. He knew what was going on. That's why He was so shocked. Well, He probably wasn't as shocked. It was more of a, He was like, come on, guys, by now, your life is better. Yeah, God knows. I don't care what you're going through. I don't care how difficult it is. If you are a believer in Christ, you have a relationship with Him. He's your friend. Yes. And your Lord and your Father. He is intimately close to you. As a believer, you have the Holy Spirit of God in you. He knows. Don't know what you're going through. Some of y'all are going through things right now. I know our world seems to be going through things right now. I know the church probably going through things right now. I don't know what is going on. God knows. God is able, and God cares. He is able to intervene. He's able to do something. That doesn't mean He's going to do it your way, or the way you want Him to do it, or the way you expect, but He is able to intervene. And God cares. And that last one, God cares, is important, because I feel like that's probably the biggest issue that we have. I think A lot of us here, we've been in church for a while. We've heard these Bible stories for a while. So it's actually not hard for us to believe that God knows and that God is able. Most of us can remember that. What we forget, I think, is that He cares. I think that's what ends up happening to us. We forget that He cares so much for you that Christ died. And it didn't just stop there. He cares so much for you that He gave you His Holy Spirit so that as you go through your life, He's there with you. He cares so much that He described His relationship with you as that of a father with their child. A good father, greater than you can imagine. Not a worldly father that is flawed, but a good, loving father, greater than you can imagine. He said, that's the kind of love I have for you. He cares. And when we go through these storms, when we go through these difficulties, we've got to remember, yes, He knows. Yes, He's able, but also He cares about you. The person who loves you more than anybody you can imagine. He loves you more than your mama, your dad, your spouse. He loves you more than you can imagine. But He also knows more than you know. So as we look at these realities, He knows. He's able. He cares. As we look at these realities, I want that to be what we do. Let's remind ourselves with what storms we're going through. Yeah, God did not guarantee me a pain-free life. But He did guarantee me that He'll work it together for good for those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. See, that's a promise in Scripture. Romans 8:28. What we do see is that He knows, that He is able, and that He cares. So if you're a believer, I don't care what you're going through, rest on that truth. But if you're not a believer, some of you maybe aren't believers in here, He wants to have that relationship with you. That relationship with you, where you look at Him and you say, He's not just my Creator, but He is my Father. He is my friend. He's my Lord. He wants to have that relationship. So I'm here, as we do the hymn of invitation, I'm here to pray with you and for you. Maybe you're going through a struggle and you just need encouragement to remember these things. Let me pray for you. Or maybe you don't have that relationship with Him and you want to pray to receive Christ. I'm here for you there as well.
Let's stand and sing hymn number 238, Breathe on Me.